Hello and welcome to this latest video. It's been a long time coming, but we're finally going to take a look at that Pygmalion overview. I figured since its latest expansion, Investment Opportunities, is going to be freely available to all players on Wednesday, it seemed as good of a time as any to put out an overview for Pygmalion. And the intention is kind of that regardless of if you're a new player wanting to pick him up as your next character, if you're someone who's trying to get into him with the new items, or even if you're a returning player who just wants to get your bearings on everything that's changed, this guide will kind of cover everything for everyone. But speaking of covering everything for everyone, I also wanted to give a huge shout out to the GooseFathr, who is an excellent content creator who makes very good educational content focused around especially Pygmalion. He's got a very good comprehensive document that kind of ranks all of the various builds that he keeps up to date for the latest meta. And he also has this very comprehensive PYG Academy complete guide, which covers a lot of the practicals on how to actually play Pygmalion. He was also a big help in the making of this video, as he was kind of my ball plank and provided some feedback and just made sure that everything was properly looked over by someone who has a few more hours in Pygmalion than me, to put it lightly. But without further ado, let's dive into the actual overview. So, Pygmalion works a bit differently compared to most other characters in the Bazaar. Compared to any other character in the Bazaar, in fact. And I'll get into why, but first I just want to point out, if this all seems very overwhelming, don't worry, I'm gonna break it all down piece by piece, and by the end of it, you should feel like you have a very complete understanding of, at least in a archetypical, like general sense, what are the things that Pygmalion do and how do they connect with each other. Some things, though, don't really necessarily connect with anything else, and I'm specifically referring to the fort up here in the corner. The reason why it's isolated from the rest is because, very similarly to Crow's Nest on Vanessa or something like that, I consider it more of a modifier than a build in its own right. It can make a lot of different boards stronger. It can make a Ice Club board stronger, it can make a double whammy board stronger, it can make a spiky shield board stronger. It just goes in a lot of places, but at the same time, all of those boards also typically work quite well without the fort. And in a similar role, there's Phonograph as well, which is also just a powerful force multiplier for one of your other items. I'll point out some examples of where you might want to be looking for it as we go, but the general idea is that it's a modifier that you add on to other builds. But we also have this big green area right down here, which obviously stands out quite a bit. In honor of our PenFT, I have dubbed it the Metaverse. And it's because Pygmalion is very focused around economy, around money, around the concept of using various items and strategies to get a ton of gold and then having means of converting that gold into tangible advantages, both as all characters do by upgrading your items, but it also lets him have a lot more flexibility when it comes to pivoting by just having so much money that you can do your entire board over and still have money to spare, but also by means of directly increasing the value of his items for those that scale with that, or by using a lot of money to gain more base health, which can offer you an advantage on any build that you play. And these two main aspects, the money and the health, it's relevant for every single build that you play on Pygmalion. This is kind of what and who Pygmalion is. So these are the elements that you're expecting to interact with every single run in some way, in some capacity. And a few of them that I've chosen, like the money tree and the lemonade stand, they're also items that can be played in their own right, but I have them there as they're kind of very archetypical examples, and I had to use something to showcase. And after all, Money Tree literally is made of money, so it did seem like the perfect example to just symbolize the economy generating items. And I did mention the health as well. Specifically, we also have the pawn shop package, which ties into the first build that I'll kind of be going over, which is another quintessential typical pig build. It goes by a lot of names. Some people call it Big Pig, some people call it Fat Pig, some people call it Big Bonk. It's had a lot of names throughout the lifespan of the game, but the general idea is that you scale up your health either through meta scaling, through health, or just strapping a pawn shop right on your board. And then you pair that with a belt to multiply your health. And finally, use something like a lion's cane or a double whammy to convert that health into damage. And the reason I'm starting over here and kind of pointing out this build is because I did mention that Pygmalien can be very flexible. This is especially true when it comes to this pawn shop, because it's one of the best economy generating items for any build, and especially a few that I will point out too. But because it's so good at generating economy, oftentimes you'll have it in your stash and you'll be passively stacking it as you're looking for the core pieces of whatever build you're looking for. Your drum in a drum build, your club in a club build, your fort in a silk build, whatever it may be. And the idea then is that if you hit that thing, you sell the pawn shop to fund the money to buy that thing. But if you instead find belt and double whammy, but you don't find the ice club that you needed or the drum that you needed, you can put the pawn shop on the board, sell the board you were playing, play the big pig stuff. And this is especially true when it comes to specifically silk, because silk scales by cycling. This is to some degree true for chaos as well, but silk is the most prominent one. Because of this, pawn shop is the ideal pairing. It can do things like money tree too, where it'll generate tokens that you sell and give you more scaling. But if you want the maximum revenue from the concept of cycling, pawn shop gives you that. Silk wants to cycle. The overlap is very natural. And this then goes both ways. It's the perfect example of Silk wants to be paired with these shield payoff items. You want Spiky Shield or the Crusher Claw to convert your shielding into damage, and ideally you might want both of them, or a duplicate of one of them, or an obsidian enchant on the spiky shield, or a fort to force multiply them, just any way that you can make them more impactful. And when you don't find that, you pivot back into the pawn shop, you go into the big pig stuff. It works both ways. However, these things down here in the bottom, they are still relatively self-contained. They don't necessarily interact much with the rest of the stuff for better or for worse, because it means you can fairly independently pivot into them no matter where else on the board you are, but it also means that they don't necessarily have natural interactions with anything else. So to kind of dive deeper into some of the especially newer stuff that Pyg's been doing, because this is all old items as well, we're going to start in the opposite end over here and look at the gym, which that's again right now, it's a very powerful economy item. You typically pick it up when you're already playing one of the many weapon boards, because you'll naturally want to be buying and selling and cycling weapons, and it's nice that it provides you with some extra health on the side. And this is an example again of one of the economy items that can potentially go on your board. In this current patch, the gym has a very long base cooldown, so you would only really consider playing it if you have found a lot of wings and feathers, maybe through using a boomerang, or if you have one of those phonographs to really speed it up. More often than not, you're just selling it for the money, but it's still good to know that it can be a powerful item to hit your board. And the main reason for this is that Pygmalion has certain items that work really well with damage buffs. Yo-Yo is just such a fast activator. It's going to go off a lot if you give it any kind of damage scaling. It can completely take over a match. And the Addle and Caltrops, they're kind of classic pairings for damage boosts. Most everything in the game has gotten much longer cooldowns at this point, so the fact that LL can still hit that 1 second base cooldown makes it one of the quickest things in the game, just downright. And one of the main concerns of Pygmalien is often the fact that you can be vulnerable to being frozen out or permaslowed or just heavily disrupted, but that doesn't work so well against caltrops, so it offers a lot of counterplay against those types of strategies. Another classic way of buffing them has always been the crook, square pig as it's oftentimes called. It's much more limited now. In the past, there would have been an arrow here, because crook used to buff all weapons based on how many medium items you have. Now, they've made it so that it only buffs medium weapons, which makes it much more limited. There are still some spots when you can play it, especially as a mid-game piece, but the primary purpose of it is to make sure that the LL hits the necessary base speed or that the caltrops have the necessary damage to actually beat someone in combat. More commonly, the kind of big two right now is drums and 28-hour fitness. Drums just give haste to all of the weapons on your board and innate scaling. It's going to supercharge any weapon board, and it goes with most weapons, it just depends on the average quality. I've chosen to highlight especially the snowmobile, since after its change to work off of any of your items getting hasted, not just itself, it goes very, very quick with the drums. It's an excellent pairing. But this is also the perfect board to slot in any kind of enchanted fangs that you find from monster encounters, if you have a shiny or obsidian one especially, any kind of random shiny enchants or obsidian enchants that you might have gotten from Isla, pretty much whatever you can think of that has red numbers and is good will be better with the drum. I did also mention it's very good with Yo-Yo, which also has access to the toy support package. This is especially helped by the fact that Slingshot is also a toy, which means that when you're using Ship in a Bottle, you can give both the Yo-Yo and the Slingshot multi-strike, multicast, and this just supercharges the drum even further. The Slingshot can be a good way to kickstart a snowmobile or something, and then the snowmobile and the yo-yo start just cycling off each other and going crazy. It can also be played with the speedrunner here, one of the new items. It's a lot worse now than it was at launch, but it's still fully playable if you have something worth speeding up, so that's something you can keep an eye open for too. It charges when you use an adjacent toy, and then when you use it, it charges a non-toy, so usually you'll want to make sure that your board only has one non-toy and that that's a good win condition, that you actually care about charging, maybe an ice club or something like that. Finally, I did mention the 28-hour fitness and the showcase as well. This is kind of the new shield and weapon archetype that Pygmalien has going on, and it trades some of the crazy acceleration of a drum board for instead having way more stamina by giving you a ton of shielding with the damage as well. And it's got some interesting synergies that I'll go into more as well. The main advantage of it is that the showcase is very easy to find. It starts at bronze. It's probably the best early game scaling piece now. You can kind of think of it as the shark claws of Pygmalion or something. You also have the lumbors to go with it, so you just have a lot of excuses to end up in this kind of left side weapon quadrant of him currently. But the other thing worth noting is that if you have any shield items with obsidian enchants or weapons with shielded enchants, that's when these ones start really going crazy. It becomes so much more slot efficient because you can get just one slot that has both tags and you'll manage to hyperscale pretty much everything. Speaking of hyperscaling, the other way of doing that Pygmalion has access to, kind of the last bit here down in the Metaverse, and also the NFT that I kind of named it after, these are the give value to the items on your board stuff. And these ones give permanent value. This new stuff oftentimes gives in-combat value. So you've got both those vectors, but there's a lot of overlap in terms of which items care. Most things that grant value don't necessarily need specific tags, with some exceptions like the VIP pass, which can only scale properties. And you also have some items like the balcony here, which can only boost properties. So most of the time you can buff anything that cares about value. For some stuff, you'll want to focus in on the properties. Speaking of which, we do have a few. There's Fixer Upper, the kind of archetypical one, and then you have all of your various flavors of scrapers. You can do a sub-scraper, a skyscraper, a space scraper, and any of them will work very well. The main thing to look out for is that for the ones that aren't skyscraper, you need to fix your damage somehow. It's oftentimes not that difficult for the shield ones, as you can follow this yellow arrow down and pick up any of the shield scaling things. If you have something like an obsidian or fiery or toxic sub-scraper, you can also follow the green arrow up to the heal payoffs, and here we're especially interested in Tent for the multicast, as well as offering us protection from being one-shot by stuff like Vanessa's Keg. Outside of just scaling properties for values, we also have two kind of generic value scalers. This one, the new one, the Coin Cure, is a bit of a weird one. It gains value when you win combats, kind of like Crystal Bonsai, but if you lose a combat, it will get destroyed, and you do get the money, but if you were heavily invested in making this your carry, then you need to rapidly pivot into another line. Maybe you had like a stacked pawn shop, gets you into double whammy, that kind of stuff, but it's high risk, high reward. There are some really good players like Ragnar Regis, plays it a whole ton, but at the same time, others might be a little bit more reluctant to go all in on a strategy that can backfire in that way. So depends entirely on your preference. If you like to live on the edge, you definitely want to look out for Coin Cure. If you prefer to play it a bit more safe, then we've got the Luxury Kiwas down here. They're a very consistent item in the sense that it has burn already, which means that the damage portion, oftentimes the hardest part, is kind of innately solved. And because of this, it doesn't really go with anything specific. You can play it with most things. It's fine with Pawn Shop or Belt to just have a ton of health to keep you alive while the opponent burns. You could do the same thing with a lot of freeze stuff. You just freeze them and then burn them. You can double it up with the fort. You can have the cooldown with a diamond phonograph. It's kind of up to you. It's just a consistent, reliable line that can utilize things that grant value to other things. Then I did mention that there were the specific ones that care a lot about in-combat value. And then we have the Bad Blocker and the Riceballer, which do kind of the same thing. For every item that has at least 10 value on your board, it gains one more multicast. Ideally, you want to just pair this with the Pen of Tea. It'll give temporary value to everything on your board. Easy peasy, you're just done. You can also have it slightly more laborious, but by using Deed, even though it has been heavily nerfed, it's still pretty good at this specific thing. Or Truffles, to make sure that you put some permanent value on your stuff. Diamond, mediums, or above will also just naturally get above the threshold. There are a few ways that you can go about it, but they both provide just a ton of multicast procs. In terms of the bad blockers, since they're shield procs, they work great with the 28-hour fitness. They work great with the wrist warrior that lets you convert those shield procs into damage procs as well, if you have any kind of scaling for that, something like a sharp corners. It's a very natural, very powerful combo. The Rice Bowler, on the other hand, provides very fast burn procs, together with the matchbox oftentimes, they can go into sauna. I did mention that when it comes to heal lines, generally, one of the big issues is to solve your damage. But if you scale your heal by applying burn, that's kind of solved for you. This is especially powerful now that healing frequently is the best way of cleansing any kind of debuffs. So you just hop in the sauna, put on your rice baller. I don't even quite know what the rice baller does. Let it boil its rice, whatever it gets up to, and you'll be cured of pretty much any ailment known to man, and most that aren't either. You're going to be unkillable to most conventional means. It has to be something like a big one-shot, which those are definitely around too, especially to counter this kind of strategy, but it's still good to be aware of. This can be especially powerful when paired with the hogwash, as it lets you continuously boost your maximum health to the point that you can get out of range of a lot of the stuff that doesn't deal percent max health like Keg, but rather maybe it's an arbalest or a femur or an ice club. You can get way out of range of what they can typically deal to you. And then we finally also have this last one, the Hypergreen, which uses, it heals you equivalent to the value of both adjacent items when you use either adjacent item, and when it uses itself, it scales them both up. There are two main ways to use this item, which is frankly a very interesting one. Kind of another, there are just so many key pieces in this last expansion, which is why I'm choosing to cover this kind of right now. But this is one of them. And the first way that you can use it is if you have the pen of tea, you scale up the value, and then you place items with a lot of multicast on both sides, like a bad blocker and a rice baller. Then you just have them both activate and provide a ton of triggers, and then you get the value scaling from the hypergreens and the pen of tea. The other way that you can use it is if you only have one of these two items, like say you got a rice baller, but you also have a coin cure or a pawn shop or a kiosk or a fixer-upper, any of these items that care about stacking value, and you've stacked value on it. You have tons of value on it. You can put it on one side of the hypergreens as kind of a stat stick, a heal stick, a value stick, whatever you want to call it. It provides a ton of value, and then when you use the fast item on the other side, be it the pen of tea, be it the rice ball, or whatever you've put there, a shiny fang, sky's the limit, it will heal for way, 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 way more. So it's kind of, do you want twice the amount of short, rapid heals, or do you want less heals but to make them much bigger? And this can also kind of determine what you might want to pair it with. The hogwash can be especially good if you are going for this small heals and you just want to keep boosting your max health to have that high ceiling to reach for. And then there is kind of one final big thing that Pygmalien gets up to outside of this, and it's this top sort of freeze corner that we have. And it's a little bit out of nowhere because there's no easy way to get into it. You have to just pick up some freeze enablers. The line is a little bit blurry between freeze enablers and freeze payoffs. There's a lot of overlap. Most people think of Cold Room as, at least I principally think of it as an enabler, because it's one of the best ones at getting the most freeze triggers, but it does also give you regen, so it's kind of a payoff in its own right as well. But the core concept is still the same. You get things that freeze, and you get things that benefit off of you freezing. Some of the typical examples is, of course, Ice Club. It's kind of a ridiculous item. If you find obsidian on that, it's just gonna obliterate anyone. You can just go simple with the ladle. You freeze people, you burn them. It's kind of the same strategy as with the kiosk. It's no surprise that they're so similarly themed items from the same expansion. I also put Shatter here. I'll go into a bit more detail on that in just a second, but that is a powerful way of enabling the freeze to sort of overlap with the entire weapons package. If you have Shatter, nothing's preventing you from playing the caltrops. If you have shatter and you put obsidian on like iceberg, really powerful. You can use shatter to scale up a yo-yo, all sorts of stuff like that. But it's mainly about which obsidian enchants you can use it. And the other package that you can take the free stuff into is if you make it go into this shield package instead. And this is primarily fueled by Iglo is the key one. They reverted it to being whenever you freeze with anything, not just when you use it. It gains more targets as you level it up, so it'll kind of be both enabler and payoff at the same time. If you get an enchant on it, like Toxin, like Obsidian, like Fiery, anything that you can scale, any sort of shield scaling becomes ridiculously powerful. Obviously, Aurora Dome is the natural one for that. It scales your shield stuff whenever you freeze. Iglo wants you to freeze. They pair very naturally. However, you can also play Wrist Warrior with, for example, the Iglo Shatter combo, as this is effectively giving up one slot on your board to provide a free Obsidian enchant for your Iglo, which is very, very powerful. It means that whenever you freeze, you both shield and do damage. You do need any kind of damage scaling to pair with this, but if you have that, it can be incredibly powerful. This is also a natural pairing where oftentimes you will go the Wrist Warrior with the bad blocker, especially if you have a 28-hour fitness. The bad blocker will go off a bunch of times, which scales the damage of the Wrist Warrior, but also triggers it, and you just do a lot of damage. But especially if you have something like a Obsidian Igloo, you can even run Igloo in the 28-hour fitness or maybe showcase line to get a way of scaling it. If you don't have any enchant like that, it can be a bit tighter on slots. You can still make it work though if you find something like a shielded yo-yo, or you have obsidian on any of the other pieces, or you kind of get the general idea. Because there is a decent amount of overlap between all of the stuff, and because Pygmalien has access to a ton of money, it means that you can fairly fluidly transition between all of these different comps, and whenever you find some kind of enchanted item or off-class item or just thing that you're not normally supposed to have access to, Pygmalien is currently maybe the most well-positioned character when it comes to getting to utilize this, because you'll have the money to be able to do it, you'll have the health to be able to do it, you'll have the support pieces like Fort or Phonograph, whichever one is relevant, to be able to do it. I think in general, it's gotten a lot harder to play Pygmalion, but it's gotten a lot more fun too. The thing I want to point out more than anything else is Bad Blocker is a new item, Wrist Warrior is a new item, PenFT is a new item, Hypergreen is a new item, Riceballer is a new item. These are kind of not making Pygmalion a ton stronger. The best builds are still Ice Club, which you had before, Big Pig, which you had before, Shield Payoffs, which you had before, Drum builds, which you had before, we have Crook builds, which we had before. There are a lot of familiar strategies here, but the new items are what tie this entire middle section together. They are the reason that we can get from here to here. They're the reason we can get from here to here to here to here. We can actually move fluidly between comps. And flexibility is a strength in and of itself, but more than anything, I think it's what makes a character really fun. Is when you get to feel like you're being creative and you're making decisions that matter. It's just the best. So I hope that maybe this inspires a few of you as well to give Pygmalion a chance, see if you like the new stuff he's got going on. I've been having a blast, but I'm also really excited to start playing Dooley again when he gets his expansion. You can't say no to a bunch of adorable dinosaurs. I'm always down for more Mac, it was my first overview. There's a lot to look forward to. But let me know in the comments below if you gave Pygmalion a try. And in the meantime, Thank you all for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of my guides as they come out. Don't forget to check out GooseFathr. Just amazing content, amazing person. Give him some love from me. And in the meantime, I hope wherever you are, you have a wonderful day, morning, evening, or night, and that I'll see as many as possible of you in the next one.